All right, so let's go ahead and try to start on time today. We have a great panel lined up for us. Welcome to the second day of the 2021 Vermont Organics Recycling Summit, organized by the Composting Association of Vermont in partnership with the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. This year's summit is being held during International Compost Awareness Week, which is the largest and most comprehensive education initiative of the compost industry. For those who don't know me, I'm Natasha Duarte, Director of the Composting Association of Vermont. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of our sponsors this year. These include Community Bank, Eco Products, Vermont Natural Ag Products, Addison County Solid Waste Management District, Agrilab Technologies, EcoPixel, Nature Cycle, the Vermont Produce Program from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and the Eco-AmeriCorps program from the Department of Environmental Conservation. And I'd like to invite Brian Giroux, President of Agrilab Technologies, to share a little bit, as he's our featured sponsor for the day, or for this webinar.
Good morning. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, everyone. Just a quick piece about our company, Agrilab Technologies, Inc. We're based right here in Vermont. And our whole point was to make composting more efficient and easier. Two pieces that directed us to have a particular focus on compost aeration and heat recovery were around the fact that an active compost pile can run out of oxygen in its core in as little as an hour after a turn with a loader or other equipment. So providing aeration to the core of the pile really accelerates and manages the process. What's shown here in this picture is one of our modular units that was developed over a few years. This one being delivered on a skid platform, but it's got an aeration unit, control panel and sensors, but also heat recovery. So that was the other fascinating part about working with composters, is just seeing the enormous amount of thermal energy that was coming off of these piles. So over a number of years, we've worked with a lot of great partners to develop practices and equipment to recover that heat for on-site use. Next slide. One of our most fun examples is with the Foster Brothers Farms, Vermont Natural Ag Products down in Middlebury. Our equipment in this case isn't in a skid, but it's in that shipping container. And you might be able to see the steam or exhaust coming out of the pipe at the top of the container. But our system more or less pulls air down through those piles on the pad through underground pipes and then up into that equipment that you saw on the other slide, aerating the piles, giving them more oxygen, speeding up the process, but also pulling in vapor up to 150 degrees at times, converting it into the form of water or glycol, like a solar thermal or geothermal system, and then putting that heat to use for heating buildings, drying down product before screening, wash water, and other things. So that's some of what we do, and look forward to hearing the panel that's coming up.
Thanks so much, Brian, for sharing about your work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Before we get going with today's program, I'd like to just make two short announcements. One is a new initiative from the Composting Association of Vermont with support from all of these great partners. I worked with Paul and Winsong Kervik to create a 2021 food scrap story calendar, which featured photographs of the interesting designs that they found emerging in their food scrap bucket on their kitchen counter. And then seeing this calendar at her grandmother's house, 4-year-old Neoma created her own food scrap art. And so this gave us the idea to work with all of this creativity and interest and launch a statewide food scrap art campaign, which is launching this week. You can learn more about it at the CAV website under projects, and the submissions will be featured on the CAV website, and some of them will be selected for our 2022 calendar. So now on to today's program. We're going to start this morning's session with the food scrap composting success stories from the field. Just a quick reminder that our 1 p.m. is focused on compostable, disposables, and durables. And at 3 p.m. this afternoon is the food scrap diversion strategies for multi-unit complexes. Also at 3 is the virtual tour of the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District compost facility. So we hope you guys will be able to stay with us throughout the day and enjoy some of these other sessions as well. And so now I'm going to switch what I'm sharing and pass it over to Athena to get us going.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Our panelists have a wealth of compost information to share with you today. So I'm going to talk just briefly about community composting. Community composting is about community members working together to learn about composting. They need to know the regulations, the local ordinances, develop a compost site plan, and share with neighbors, prepare a budget for containers, and figure out potential funding sources, secure carbon sources for ongoing needs, prepare the site, ensure enough volunteers, pretty much everything that any kind of small scale compost operation would have to do. So community compost operations, they come in all sizes and they can be in urban, suburban, rural areas. So these slides here are primarily, or all of urban areas. So the one on the top left is a dirt factory. It's been around for a number of years and they're in Philadelphia. The two on the right side are in New York City, and they have been practicing community composting there again for years. And the one on the lower left is Eco City Farms, and they are in Philadelphia, I think. So, and then in rural areas, Natasha and I have been working on rural community composting for several years now. We pretty much started it, at least on a larger scale. So we worked on projects a lot in Vermont and then also around the Northeast. So the two slides on the left side are a urban farm. It's a small, very small town in Norway, Maine, and they have a large garden right in the center of the town there. And so they had been composting on site and wanted to do more community composting and get food scraps from the local area. The one on the top right is Charlotte, and Natasha probably knows how long they've been going, but they've been going for a number of years. And they take all the food scraps from the school there, as well as staff and some of the local folks in town offices, I believe. And then the lower right one is in Ludlow. It's a community garden established by the Ludlow Community Garden there. So this is images of Champlain co-housing. Natasha worked a lot with them. On the lower left, you'll see the Jora tumbler. We really encourage the use of Joras for community composting because they are fully enclosed. They're definitely bear proof. They're definitely rodent proof and other wildlife proof. And they will get up to temperatures. They'll reach at least 90 to 100 degrees and often over to PFRP. And they're very rapid composting. So they handle all food scraps, and we suggest wood shavings as the carbon source. And then you can add in animal bedding, some straw and other kinds of carbon. And then at the Champlain co-housing, they also start by feeding the food scraps to their chickens. And then often when we set up these, the food scraps will be decomposed. They go and then you start, it's a dual chamber operation or a system. And then they'll go into the next chamber. And then the other food scraps will sit for a while and slow down. And then you can put them into another soil saver or earth machine bin to finish composting and curing. So this is in Montpelier. It's on Elm Street, Compostville 3.0. They've gone through several transitions in their compost site, and this is their latest iteration. Their community garden has been well established, and it's right in a neighborhood there. And so they do take food scraps from their community garden members, and I believe other folks as well. And it's all these sites are still going really well. So we have I've worked with probably at least 15 community composting sites, some at schools and then the gardens and all other places. So just like with the other compost operations, you do have to follow the regulations. Throughout the United States, these regulations vary widely. So you need to check your local ordinances and also your state regulations to find out, what those requirements are. So, and again, you want to operate them to minimize odors and prevent wildlife and do appropriate setbacks in case you're on the waterways. The Elm Street one, for example, is right next to the Winniski River. Obviously, you practice safety and health protocols. You keep a neat site appearance. try to screen it from view. And then always talk with your neighbors because they want to know what's going on and you want to make sure that they're okay with it and get their buy-in and offer to, you know, show them around the area and what you intend to do. And then obviously know your compost, make sure your compost team knows their compost, and then you keep copious records in case you run into issues. So now I'm going to introduce our next presenter, Eric Parrish, excuse me. He is, and with his family, the proprietors of Champlain Farm. They're an organic beef and vegetable farm, and I'll let him tell you more about that. And he's been in the composting business for several years now. And go ahead, Eric.
Okay, thank you, Athena. Good morning, everyone. As Athena said, we have a certified organic farm. We are also primarily certified organic dairy, as well as beef and some vegetables, and we process compost. We've been processing compost since 2005, and I'll try to keep this condensed because I know we don't have a lot of time, but in the course of time from 2005 onward, we realized the need for growth. So in 2015, we were successful in getting a SARE grant, and we secured James McSweeney from Compost Technical Services who orchestrated a pilot program for an ASP. The data that we received from the pilot program seemed to indicate that an ASP would actually speed up our composting process. So over the course of the next few years, we worked off and on with Brian Jaros, and in I believe 2019 into 2020, Brian was hugely instrumental in helping me secure some grant funding for our existing ASP. The grant funding came from I got a BMP grant from the Vermont Department of Ag, Clean Energy Development Fund, and a grant from NOFA. And we did secure a loan, a personal loan from Vermont Community Loan Fund to fund our project. So in 2020, Brian Jaros with his team from Agrilab Technologies engineered, designed, and in 2021, in the fall of 2021 and into the winter actually of 2021, we built our current ASP system on our composting site. As when we started composting in 2005, we started off accepting about 3 tons of food scraps a week, which I thought was a huge amount. We're currently up to 12 to 15 tons of food scraps a week, and we are growing, and mainly because of Act 148, I can see that growing as well. And we're permitted to take it at least, or up to, I should say, 2,000 tons of food scraps a year, which I'm sure we will be able to process. The ASP system has worked amazingly well, actually beyond my expectations. And although I'm still working with Brian to dial in the correct recipe, I'm very, very happy with the way the ASP system has performed. It has the heat recovery unit, which we're planning on a couple of buildings at the compost site this spring. We ran out of time last fall, but I'll be able to capture the heat from the compost and radiant heat these 2 buildings. And also, as we're doing now, we're drawing heat through the compost, and we have the ability to draw heat through hot piles and blow heat through cool piles, which jump starts them. So that's kind of the rundown on what we're doing with the current ASP system. And Agrilab Technologies has set up the zones 1, 2, 3, and 4. Primarily, most of the composting process takes place in zones 1 and 2, and in phase 1, which is zones 1 and 2. And phase 2 is the next step in the composting process, where after phase 2, it goes to a finished pile to finish heating. And some of the site work was completed with the help of Zhang Construction, Goodwin Electric, Padwin Construction, and Harris Plumbing and Heating. And this shows, this is before this is the grading being done before we actually started the concrete construction of the ASP system. And we do call ourselves Kingdom View Compost. And as you can see right directly over or past the excavator, that's Burke Mountain ski area with Darling Hill in the forefront after Pudding Hill. So this is where the existing pad is. And this is the grading process. Next slide. And this is a heat recovery unit built by Brian Jaros, Agrilab Technologies and team. This is my hot skid. This is my heat recovery unit. It's much like the one Brian showed on the other composting operation, works in much the same way. And on the screen that you can just barely see on the left-hand side, that is the brains of the whole unit. That's where we can control the heat coming into different piles, being blown out to different piles, and also shows the aeration temps and so forth. And this is Jason up on top. He's making the connection fittings of the heat recovery unit. As you can see, we set it on that slab, that pad actually, that you can see, that platform, and then we built our shed around it. And that's me in the tractor moving some aeration pipes into place. These are big HDPE aeration pipes, which are very strong, very rugged, and we insulated those to when the composting system is on operation, which is basically 24/7. These insulated pipes carry the heat from the compost to the heat recovery unit, and then it's exhausted or put through the plenum to be used to heat the glycol and water for the radiation heat for the buildings. We're installing the HDPE aeration pipes. There's a fusion welder that welds the pipes together using heat to actually melt the plastic and weld it together. So this is part of the installation process. And we're attaching, doing the, I believe this is the insulated pipe that we laid under the ground before winter came in. And actually, this is electrical conduit as well. That is running from the aeration unit, which is in the shed in the background there. Well, right now in that picture, it's not a shed; it's covered with a tarp. But that is where some of the aeration, not the aeration pipes, but the insulated pipe to the buildings is and will go, and that's also carrying the conduit, which carries the electricity to and from the building. And here we are too. This is actually taking the insulated pipe and the electrical conduit to the site of the greenhouse, which will be heated by the heat from the compost. And that's insulation. We're in the process of heating those HDPE pipes, as I mentioned before. And that is zone 2 that's actually the second bay of zone phase 1, actually. I call it phase 1, zone 2. And that's the obviously the cement slab just after being poured. We're in the process of just beginning to build the concrete walls with those big, huge concrete blocks that you can see to separate the different phases and zones of the system. And you can see the insulated pipe in the foreground. And that's a trench, that's an aeration trench, and that is a nice shot of showing how the aeration pipes lay in the aeration trench. That's phase 1, zone 2. You can see the double aeration pipes laid in the trench. Those have perforations in each pipe at approximately 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the pipes, pointing somewhat down. And we cover those pipes with large particle wood chip, and then we load the composting material on top of that for aeration. This is actually phase 2, showing the aeration pipes laid on grade, which they are in phase 2. Phase 1, they're subgrade in trenches. Phase 2, they're on grade. You can see the wood chip over the aeration pipes, preparing it for a loading of compost on the aeration pipes. And this is the actual loading where it does show we're working after sunset, and I think that was taken on December 17th, but as we all know, that's not as late as you might think. Sunset's pretty early on December 17th. But anyway, we are in the process of loading the first batch of material on the ASP aeration pipes. Zone 2, yes, zone 2 in phase 1 in the process of being loaded. This is just showing the aeration of the composting working pad in general. Zone 2 is zone 2 is to the left. Zone 1, phase 1, is to the right. Phase 2 is to the left, and you can see zone 1 and zone 2 to the right, and zones 3, 4 on the left-hand side in phase 2, with the aeration shed in the background fully complete. This is the first loaded batch on Zone 1, and it has just finished completion of that batch in Zone 1 when this picture was taken on December 28, 2020. This is a good shot of the way the heat recovery unit control panel looks. This is the dashboard panel. It has the temperature panel, compost and aeration trend, as well as water trend screens. But this shows that you can monitor the temperature of the vapors coming in as well as going out. And this is where you can see the different bays where you can control the aeration coming into the bays as well as going out of the bays. And you can the recirculation aspects of the process and so forth. This is where most of or actually all of the control of the system takes place. And this is showing a delivery of food scraps. This is Black Dirt's trailer on the ramp of our receiving bay, having just dumped a load of food scraps from local grocery stores and institutions and other food waste generators that we receive. And this is just showing after I had removed the material from phase 2. I prepared it for the next loaded batch, and I didn't need to do much at this point in time because I left most of the larger wood chip particles in place. So I had removed the material to go to a finished pile, and it is ready to be reloaded with new material. And there's the contact information, my name, address, and email and phone number, as well as Brian Drose's email and phone number. And obviously, I can take some questions later on in this meeting, is the intent of the meeting, so that we can answer some questions. But if not, then you can contact Brian or myself directly.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we will move on to our next presenter. Bob Spencer is next. He has over 20 years of experience in the development and operation of composting facilities. He is a consultant to communities and companies throughout the country, and currently the executive director of Windham Solid Waste Management District, and also the CAV Board of Directors president. Okay, Bob.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. And I want to thank Natasha for putting this program together. She's done an amazing job. And if you have the time, you'll learn a lot this week. Windham Solid Waste Management District is a municipal government based in Brattleboro. We have 18 member towns. And until 2017, we operated a MRF and processed recyclables from throughout the region. Due to many factors, the district board voted to shut it down. And since then, our priority has been on composting organics. Next. Brattleboro Town is an amazing partner, and they asked the district in 2012, could we take food scraps and compost them? And they were hauling them into Massachusetts to a compost facility, and it was a pretty far drive, so we got a permit as like Eric said, we were a small, under the state, small food waste composting facility, which lets us take up to 2,000 cubic yards of food scraps a year. Next. We have some great events in Brattleboro, Strolling of the Heifers, which is a parade and a food and local resource festival in the summer. And we have the Brattleboro ski jump. And anyway, the logo that you just saw is of the ski jump. And Brattleboro has it on their curbside compost containers. Next. The town sells at cost to residents these curbside compost containers. You can use anything that has a lid, 5-gallon buckets, whatever. You have weekly collection of food scraps and weekly collection of recycling and every other week trash and pay as you throw trash. So I call them reluctant composters. If you have a choice of putting food scraps in a $3.50 bag or into a container at no charge, people will compost. We have over 2,000 residences on the collection program. Next. Brattleboro is generating as much as 15 tons per week of food scraps. And it comes to our facility. And I took this picture this week. It is really amazing how good people are at keeping unacceptable materials out. Plastics, metal, glass. So you can see the paper and cardboard. Soiled paper and cardboard is a big part of our recipe. Next. We also get the leaves, which are collected in the spring and the fall. In fact, last Friday was our leaf day. They're in compostable craft bags, as you can see. We also serve a number of industrial food waste generators. This is a bread company. Actually, it's tragic. Vermont Bread Company closed a week ago. They have it's called Coffee Cup is the parent company, and for whatever reason they shut down. But this was what we got from them, about 600 tons a year. Next. We also have another bread company, and they bring us primarily eggshells in compostable bags. And excuse me, they have a machine that sucks the yolks out of the eggs. So the eggshells are their leftover material. And if you look at our compost, our finished product, we have little white flakes. And people go, what is that? And I go, it's slow release nutrients. As I mentioned, we are permitted as a small food waste composting facility, which is a theme of my presentation, which I'll talk to you about shortly because we're at capacity. We are subject to a number of permits, and from the Vermont DEC, this is our primary permit. And we have certified operators. 4 of us have been through the Vermont composting certification, operator certification, which DEC puts on every year. Thank you. Next. We have been increasing each year the total materials processed. Act 148, mandatory food scrap, is actually making this happen as it's ratcheted down to residential levels. We have more and more tons coming in, and it's going to increase probably over 1,000 tons if we can get our permit amended. Next. So we serve homes, businesses, schools, basically a lot of institutions and businesses. We operate with a scale system, so every load is weighed. The Vermont DEC regulations are based on cubic yards, and it makes it a little challenging to document our regulatory status, but we've done some pretty sophisticated monitoring and testing to know how many cubic yards we process. So for us to go to the next level of a permit would require collection and treatment of the runoff water, which is called leachate. And that is a very expensive next step. As Eric was saying, I think he's permitted as a small, we'll hear from Trevor Mance shortly with Casella. I believe they're a large, they have leachate collection. Chittenden Solid Waste, which we'll hear from, also has a large permit. But that means you need a lagoon or leachate collection system. So the regulations are pretty specific that you have to have a certain amount of leachate collection if you're going to go above the 5,000 cubic yards a year next. So you either collect it and treat it or do some sort of on-site treatment, which is difficult because we don't need more moisture. So you're basically facing hauling it off-site next. We've had engineering studies done of collecting the leachate, building retention basins, and hauling it. And the costs do not include odor treatment, which may mean some sort of aeration system to disperse the volatile organic compost. The other option is to build an enclosure, which would protect the composting pad from precipitation. And again, that's a very expensive option. So we either enclose it and prevent leachate, or we collect and treat leachate. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly to clarify, leachate is water runoff from compost facilities. So food scraps, yes, and other water, rain that hits that. And you don't want that to run off because it can be smelly and odor and all that kind of stuff.
Right. It has,
okay.
It has high biological oxygen demand, BOD.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Trevor has joined us by phone, so we won't see his picture, but he's a handsome guy. So just quickly, Trevor Mance currently serves as a Senior Business Development Manager for Casella Waste Systems out of Rutland, Vermont. Trevor began his career in waste and recycling in 1996 when he started TAM as a wee young lad. And then he's out of southern Vermont and started a compost facility and still operates that compost facility in Bennington. Go ahead, Trevor.
All right. Can you hear me and see me?
Oh, where'd you go? Yes.
All right. Good. Sorry to disappoint on being a handsome young lad. So thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Athena, for having me. It's an honor to be on this panel with the company of the rest of us that have been in this space for a long time. Bob, you kind of queued up a few things that I wanted to talk about, so I appreciate that.
Sure.
Let's start with the next slide, Natasha. So a quick little background. As Athena said, I joined Casella in 2019 after an acquisition. I think all too often Casella does not share the story beyond garbage and recycling. It was founded here in Vermont in Rutland in 75 by two brothers, Doug and John, who are both still leading the company today. They founded it based on the idea of providing solutions to the customers that they served. I am continually amazed at the depth and the breadth of the organics activity throughout the Northeast. Notable things, we handle 450,000 tons of organics for beneficial reuse every year. Other things are that we are the largest, Hawk Ridge is the largest compost facility in the Northeast, located in Unity, Maine. We sell and distribute 100,000 cubic yards of bagged or bulk fertilizer, soil amendments, just many different things, from fertilizer product to animal bedding to high carbon wood ash to finished compost. Specific to Vermont, we started food waste collection in 1999 in Burlington, Vermont. And in that same division, this year we opened the state's first depackaging facility. And we currently operate my old compost yard, which was TIM Organics in Bennington, Vermont. It's been renamed Long Trail Compost Facility, and it is a medium size, which we'll kind of get into later. Next slide. There's a quick overview of the footprint. Notable are the green dots. Bennington is noted there as Long Trail. The green dot up in Burlington is the depackaging operation. Up and to the left is Chateauguay, New York, which is the fertilizer facility where we process around 70,000 tons of biosolids with lime stabilization to produce a fertilizer. And then the one in Maine is the Hawk Ridge compost facility, again, the biggest in the Northeast. So this is the Bennington compost facility. It is located in Bennington. We serve customers throughout the tri-state area. So that makes it seem like it's bigger than it is. We really kind of go down into North Adams, Massachusetts, and we go over into Albany just a little bit. And we go up to Rutland is kind of the food waste area that we are pulling from. As we've been talking about, we are a medium-sized facility. We are under 40,000 yards of total organic feedstocks. We are under the 5,000 for food waste residuals. We don't do any animal mortalities, although we do see some come in at different times of the year. Just kind of a incidental, and then we're greater than 10,000 yards of the leaf and yard waste. The site is about 4 or 5 acres. I will show a quick little video here, but the big difference is the design standards and operating standards. Medium and large facilities have the same design and operating, which notably is that leachate collection pond. Leachate, for those that don't know what it is we'll call it the garbage juice that comes out, or the liquids that are released from food waste. Moisture management is always a key to any composting. Eric mentioned it, Bob mentioned it. You know, we're taking food scraps, which are 80% water, and we need to get them down to the 60 to 65% moisture content of our mix. So we're always kind of fighting extra water in our process. So operational overview, we take in about 20 to 25,000 total yards per year currently. So we are not maxing out our permit. We do have capacity. Our feedstocks, as we talk about food waste, horse manure, wood chips. We consume a lot of wood chips. It is always a necessary feedstock that we are looking for and trying to source. Leaf and yard waste primarily comes from the town of Bennington transfer station, which is located on that site as well. And interestingly, we are the composter for all the U.S. currency. So we get short cotton fiber from Dalton, Mass., which is Crane Company. They produce all the currency paper. And when, just like in the paper making process, when you grind up cotton, there are some fibers that fall through the screens and come out and then are dewatered, and we get the cotton fiber. And we are always looking for additional and new materials to create more products. I'll talk a little bit about product and marketing, but it's a continual focus on Casella to create products that are saleable in our local market. So I'll kind of wait on that. But next slide, Natasha. This is kind of an aerial photo. As we start this, you'll see in the center of the screen the feedstock. That's the horse manure, the wood chips. Top left is that lined leachate pond. You'll see a fence and a little bit of water. On the left-hand side of the screen is our active pad. On the right is our curing. You'll see the white pipes. Similar to Eric's system, we use an ASP to manage our PFRPs, so process to further reduce pathogens. And while this video was being taken, we were screening compost at that time. You'll also see on the right side a couple ponds there. That is another water collection system treating the runoff from the curing pad. Different process, does not require trucking and treatment offsite. It is a sand filter that just grabs any organic matter and then releases out into the field the clean water. So this is a little bit of Yankee ingenuity. I'm actually really was enjoying Eric's presentation and look forward to hitting him up for a tour. This system actually originated from Bob. Thank you, Bob, back probably 6-7 years ago. It is a fan system that we simply use a wood chip plenum, 4-inch PVC pipe, and we are a positive air system, which means that we blow air into the piles, which requires that we have a really good capping material for odor suppression. So process at the site, we take in food waste, we mixed it with our carbon, 5 parts of carbon to 1 part of nitrogen. We're looking for a bulk density of around 1,100 pounds per yard. So it's the wood chips, it's the horse manure, it's the food waste, and the cotton fiber. We mix that together, we make a windrow. It winds up spending maybe a week or so in a windrow. We then take it off of that, put it onto the pipes, which gives us another turning. We cap that with a biofilter, which is just active compost and wood chips mixed. It stays on the pipes for about 2 weeks. At that point, it comes off of the pipes and it gets put onto the curing pad. The reason for the ASP system is it cuts down the labor. To meet process for reducing pathogens, you have to turn your piles so many times to achieve that sanitizing of the bacteria. It's a lot more turnings in an open windrow system versus an ASP system. We have great temperatures with this. It consistently is above the 131 degrees. We fight overheating more than we fight underheating. We are often up in the 160s, sometimes in the 170s, even in the wintertime. So recipe development, feedstock sourcing, really critical to making a product that is saleable. So what the lens that we look at it in is it replicable, is it profitable, and is it local? And does it optimize the product performance and appearance? So by that, replicable means that we don't want one-off feedstocks. We don't want to chase new things. We want to build a recipe that we can replicate. We want to build a recipe that brings in our feedstocks. We try to target everything to be brought in for either 0 or negative, wood chips kind of being the only exception where we sometimes are forced to pay for wood chips. And that highlights the need for local. Trucking of any of these materials gets very expensive and jeopardizes the ability to break even or make money at the facility. And then the tips: establish the quality and volume standards, making sure that you have enough wood chips to last the year, making sure that you have enough leaf and yard waste so when you develop your recipe that you can always count on having the ingredients. It's no different than cooking in your kitchen. You don't want to run out of sugar. It's hard to go borrow a couple thousand tons of wood chips from your neighbor like it may be for borrowing a cup of sugar from your neighbor. We randomly test for quality. And that kind of is both in quality and of the feedstocks, but also things like running a bucket over the scale to make sure that our bulk density is where we want it to be. And contamination, I think that's probably a consistent theme throughout everybody's presentation, but contamination is so key. We want to watch it in our feedstocks, whether it be the leaf and yard waste with planter containers. We want to watch it in our food waste for sure. And we want to watch it in any kind of base loam that we bring in to make sure that there's no contamination. Maybe contamination looks like invasive species or anything else that could be a problem. So simple reminders for success, kind of in recapping, location, location, location. You really need to have the correct location of your compost site. Neighbors should be avoided at any opportunity. We work really hard on our odor suppression systems, but as Bob noted, leachate collection ponds are a source of odor. Processing that leachate is a source of odor. Storing horse manure, we actually find that to be very odorous at times. Listening to your customers and making sure that you are producing a product that they want. We sell 2 products right now, primarily, and the biggest product that we sell is topsoil. That is our kind of niche market here in Bennington. We do not sell as much compost because we just don't have the marketing or the market available to us. So we produce about 8,000 yards of topsoil for sale, which is just a mix of sand, compost, and a base loam. In other parts of Casella's footprint, for example, Maine, it's a rocky coast. There's a huge demand for compost, and they sell out every year at Hawk Ridge of their compost because it's just such a higher demand for that in that area. Educate customers and feedstock providers. Always work to educate your customer on uses of compost. It is not a cure-all for everything. Kind of a quick little example, our compost typically runs between 7.5 and 8 on the pH scale. We don't want someone that's growing blueberries to buy our compost and use it. They will not have the results they want. Blueberries want a 5.5 pH. So educating on the proper uses of your specific material is really important. And again, at every turn, reduce contamination. So thank you. I look forward to any questions. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. My email, which I failed to put on there, my apologies, is trevor.mance@casella.com.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you, Athena.
Okay, yeah, you bet. So Kim started with the Green Mountain Compost in 2015. And as she says, she fell in love with that dirty job. As the compost assistant manager for Chittenden Solid Waste District, she looks through a predominantly administrative lens, though you can find her just about anywhere trying to make sure things run smoothly at the compost operation. Kim?
Thanks, Athena, and thanks everyone for having me here today. I am with CSWD's Organic Diversion Facility, also known as Green Mountain Compost. We are a large permitted facility in Williston, Vermont. Next slide. Going into a little bit of history, in 1988, Intervale Compost Products started composting in Burlington, Vermont at the Intervale Center. Over the next 20 years, due to increase in population and composting becoming more popular, the site became unsuitable for further composting at that scale. And following some regulatory changes in 2008, CSWD acquired operations of Intervale Compost Products. So composting at the Burlington site was put on hold at that time. So CSWD kind of searched out an area that was better suited for larger composting. And in 2010, Green Mountain Compost was constructed at our current site on Redmond Road in Williston. Then over the next 10 years, we see the implementation of Act 148 and the mandate of diversion of food scraps from the landfill. We, over this course, just saw an exponential increase in food waste tonnages over time. So currently, we process nearly 6,000 tons of food waste and about 5,500 tons of leaf and yard waste a year, which ends up being about 10 to 13,000 cubic yards of straight compost, which we then take a portion of that and make 2 other blended soils. So how are we keeping up with the times, especially with the increase in food waste? Well, we were looking at, once we kind of took a step back and we're thinking, what is the potential of what we're going to see here and how are we going to expand? Trevor had mentioned that they use a lot of wood chips in their process. Well, we do also. So in order to be able to process in 10,000 tons of food waste a year, we would have had to bring in an insane amount of wood chips. And so based on our available carbon sourcing, our board of directors made a decision to kind of say, let's use what we have for our carbon sourcing. Let's keep it put right here. And let's just focus on expanding and making efficiencies on our process and our site. And then we also were looking into potential partnerships for that excess food waste. One being we're in discussions with a company called Vanguard, and we might be in partnership with them to do an on-site depack facility. To focus on the process and site efficiencies, we realized that we just needed to simplify things. We shifted our business model to focus primarily on selling only 3 products: our compost, a topsoil blend, and a garden mix or raised bed mix. Prior to that, we were making 13 different products and just complicating systems completely. We decided to kind of change our compost processing, and that was exciting because just at that time we were awarded a $500,000 infrastructure grant by the Agency of Natural Resources, and with matching funds, we were able and have completed up until January 2021. We built 7 acres of stone pad and access roads for new curing, screening, and blending and product sales areas. We were able to purchase a brand new windrow turner, an articulating dump truck, and a stacking conveyor, which led to very much more efficient ways to travel around the site and turn products. So getting into things, here are our feedstocks and the recipe that we put together to create our compost. We get food waste from institutions, businesses, events, residents, and a lot of the CSWD drop-off centers. There are 7 around Chittenden County. So residents are able to drop off their food waste and then it gets hauled to us. We take in leaf and yard debris from residents, businesses, and again, CSWD drop-off centers. The wood chips we are able to, so the wood chips that we're able to get in, we actually do grinding up at the Williston drop-off center. And depending on the schedule of the grinding and the amount that we are able to take in, we may need to supplement from local sawmills. But that's again where we had to cap our ability to process only about 5,500 to 6,000 tons of food scraps a year because of our carbon inputs. Then we also take in some select horse manure, and I use the word select because I'm sure many of you know about the persistent herbicide issue that happened in 2012. There was some herbicides being sprayed on a field of hay, and we got some of that hay. So we are very careful about where we take in our horse manure and bedding from, small list of farms, and we vet them before coming in. And then on that note, we are now adding a bit of high carbon wood ash, only maybe less than 3% of the actual recipe. We source that from Resource Management Incorporated in New Hampshire. And then we also do actually, we do add water. We have an underground storage tank on our pad that takes the leachate, so for the leachate management, and we're able to recycle that back into our phase 1 process. We have a lined lagoon, and then occasionally during droughts, we have needed to purchase water. So next slide. This is our pad. It's a concrete pad. It houses our phase 1 and phase 2 of active composting. It's a aerated system. So actually, there's a better slide next, but stay on this one. We have vector controls. So we put fishing line all around the top area. That's a pretty fun process to, I wish I had some pictures of the installation. That does keep some birds out, but some do come in. And then again, we have the underground storage tank, which the construction allows the runoff to go right directly into the tank rather than off of the pad, which you don't want to happen. So next slide. Once we get our recipe and our feed stacks in, we need to mix. With the new addition of the windrow turner, it's making things so much easier, so much faster. Prior to the windrow turner, if you see on the left-hand side, the picture of the mixer, that used an auger system to blend up all of the inputs. And it was about, it took double the amount of time that the windrow turner does to mix things. It had issues of working in wintertime, and it doesn't add as much air as the windrow turner does. So we replaced that with the windrow turner, and it's just been working out really great. Another thing is when that went down, we would have to do a lot of bucket blending, which just doesn't make as homogenized a mixture that we were really comfortable with. So, so here you see the phase 1, and you basically this is a picture of the outside of the concrete pad on the phase 1 system. So our fans are located behind the concrete wall in phase 1, and they're connected to pipes that you'll see in the top left picture. Those pipes push forced air through the piles. And on the bottom left, you'll see the plenum started and the compost being built on the outside. We then put temperature probes in, and we're able to monitor temperature and control the fans remotely. Our operator is on that every day, even on weekends and holidays. He's constantly adjusting fan temperature, fans, and monitoring the temperatures. So next slide. For phase 2, which is the next stage of active composting, we pull from phase 1, we windrow it on the pad. We originally we were only able to bucket blend it, but now it gets better homogenization by blending with the windrow turner. And then it's left in the phase 2 for about 3 to 4 weeks. And what I forgot to say on phase 1 is our phase 1, we make sure that the temperatures get up to PFRP, which is 131 degrees for 3 consecutive days. And I'll kind of repeat what Trevor said. We're also having, we generally will be fighting higher temperatures than not being able to get it up to that 131. So that's good. Next slide. So once it finishes the active phases of composting, it's ready to be processed and starting its curing process. So our old process was, before all of our efficiencies, we would pull it from phase 2, screen it right away, then haul it with a 4-yard bucket to the curing area. We'd construct massive windrows because we didn't have that much space. There were about 4 or 5 2,000 cubic yard windrows, which would be turned with an excavator. It would take us about 2 or more weeks to turn the entire curing area, and sometimes equipment would break. So it would take up to 6 months to finish. Next slide. And so the increased windrow, I need to speed up, I guess. So with the efficiencies and the site constructions that we did, we added an acre to the windrow curing area, which you'll see in the front. And so now, next slide, we haul to the curing area with our new haul truck, about 20 yards per load. And then we construct smaller windrows, 26 total, of only about 400 to 500 cubic yards each. And we turn with our windrow turner, we are able to do the entire curing area in about 3 to 4 hours, which is awesome. And we're able to do that weekly. So it finishes in about 2 to 4 months, and then we can sell it. Next slide. We then haul it to our screener. The screener has a blower vacuum that is able to take plastic fragments out. There's multiple discharge belts, and we are now, due to the new process, having higher fines yield, which is great. Next slide. We do sample all of our batches. We do a greenhouse bioassay. We use fava beans and red clover. Those tests show they're good indicator plants for persistent herbicides. And then we also send out for the STA testing, and then we do biannual tests at Montana State University for aminopyrrolid and clopyrrolid, which are those persistent herbicides. Next slide. So now these are the simplified product line. We sell compost, garden mix, and topsoil. I had said that we sold 13. Now we only sell to resellers and larger volume customers. We don't offer deliveries, so we don't have that high flux of springtime sales, but we're outsourcing and letting other resellers in the area do the work for us, which is great. Next slide. So further information, I know I had a lot to go through. Definitely check out tomorrow from 3 to 4. It's the virtual tour. You'll be able to see a much more in-depth discussion of what I just went through. It's an amazing video. Don't miss it. And then, of course, the other 2 there. Next slide. And that's all I have. So thank you. You can email me with any questions.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, we're going to open it up for questions, everybody, and we will get all the panelists up here. Lots of praises for people. Answered that one. Okay, and thanks, Josh and Kathy, for chiming in with information from ANR. Everybody should be able to look at their chat to get that. Okay, what would be the best way to address concern about multi-unit buildings in Vermont that are using dumpster for all waste and not separating recyclables or food waste? So I can chime in on that one real quickly. This afternoon at 3 o'clock is the multifamily complexes VORS panel, and they will be talking all about and giving examples of multifamily composting in action. Other catalysts?
Could I jump in on that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I think that it goes back to the education. I mean, educate. We have a duty to educate customers on what the law is. We also, I feel as though we have a duty to educate on the value of composting. I don't think that we should always lead with the stick, i.e. the universal recycling law. I think an education of why composting is good, why it affects our local economy better than sending waste to the landfill, and the value of it being a tangible recycling. The panelists had a little sidebar conversation before this meeting, and we just talked about how all of us enjoy seeing organics be recycled. It's tangible. It comes in as raw food waste. It goes out as beautiful soil back to the ecosystem locally. It's unlike any other recycling. As great as it is to see bales of cardboard, we don't really know, you can't see them being processed someplace locally where food we can. So,
thanks, Trevor. Okay, why is there such a large gap between small and medium-sized facility limits? Is there an opportunity for interim size facility like small plus, which might not need the leachate treatment requirement? Panelists, don't be biased. And also, I would welcome Josh or Kathy if you want to unmute and chime in on that.
Yeah, this is Bob Spencer. I would defer to Josh or Kathy. Vermont has really flexible regulations for composting, and there's 3 different permit sizes. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, Bob. Just trying to get myself off mute. Yeah, and I think the 3 sizes are, I mean, I haven't looked extensively at the U.S. Composting Council, which tends to be a guiding light for many states and communities when they set their parameters, but traditionally small, medium, and large has been the model.
Yeah. And then if I can add to that.
Sure.
Sure. So I'm Kathy Jameson, also with the program, and about 10 years ago, actually, it was probably close to 12 years ago, we had a pretty comprehensive stakeholder process that went on for over a year that helped us develop those tiers and where those cutoffs were before we put them into regulations. And so, and we did adopt those. And even some of the staff thought the small wasn't really small. It was kind of a big small. So, you know, there's certainly some different perspectives on that. We understand that, you know, the significance and the cost. And I guess I would encourage Bob to reach back out to the program because, you know, the rules, there are different options how the liquids can be managed. And so we want to make sure that folks understand those options before making their final decision. And so, Bob, you know, we welcome you to, you know, contact us and talk about that before deciding, you know, which way you want to go. And certainly we would welcome anyone to contact us if they're thinking about modifying their current system or planning on installing a new one.
No, thanks, Kathy. I am talking, as you know, with Dennis Fecker and also Ben Gauthier.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they're very helpful. So, but we are looking at a significant cost to collect or, you know, build a structure to prevent leachate. And my board, we have 18 towns that are members of Wyndham Solid Waste, and they do not want to invest, you know, $300,000 or $400,000 and finance it. So the reality is we're probably, as I said in my presentation, we're probably stuck where we are now.
Yeah. And just so folks know, you know, 12 years ago when we were talking about how should organic facilities be managed, liquid management runoff from them was a serious concern. And we did have existing systems that were allowing runoff from compost facilities to get offsite and potentially into surface waters. And so none of us want that, right? And that's where we had to draw a line in the rules saying, you know, the operation cannot result in a discharge to surface waters or a discharge offsite. So that's how it needs to be managed, but there's different options for getting to that end. And so that's what we want to make sure people fully explore before they go down any one decision.
Yes.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Okay, so speaking of leachate, I know that a lot of operations take the leachate and water their piles or systems with it. Have you all got any suggestions about maybe using leachate for something like compost tea or anything like that?
Well, Kim was saying that they use leachate in their process.
We do, but we have to make sure that it's in our phase 1 composting, where we are making sure that the pile temperatures get up because of the high VOD content in that.
Right,
and pathogens as well, right?
So,
yeah, there is a potential to reintroduce pathogens after you've gone through the process to further reduce pathogens. So you can't, right, Trevor?
Yeah.
Right. So you're absolutely right, Bob. And so once you've, basically wetted the piles, you would have to make sure you met the full time and temperature to address any pathogens that might have been in that liquid that you wetted the pile with.
Just to kind of add to that, one thing that we did not talk about is the difference between commercial composting and home composting. We kind of all started at the small and went up from there. So for anybody that's new to composting, all of these facilities that we're talking about are accepting meat, bone, seafood. That includes the raw chicken that we all disinfect our counter after having it on. Those pathogens are present. So the process to further reduce pathogens is because we absolutely know and acknowledge that our initial phase has pathogens that need to be killed, E. coli, salmonella. So on my flyover, the active pad is going into the lined leachate pond. The curing pad goes into a sand filter. I'm not worried about pathogens at that point. To Kim's point, we add water back to our active pad. We actually do recycle quite a bit of it. It's more in the wintertime when we don't have the warm temperatures that we sometimes can run into a storage issue. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that reason is because there's meat and bones.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor, for bringing that up. And if I can chime in on one more thing and then I'll butt out. There's actually 4 tiers when you think about it, because we have the exempt amount in the rules that we haven't talked about. And so people can compost, and this is a new number in the new rules, is up to 42 cubic yards of food residuals, food scraps a year. Still fall under the exempt amount. And that's so that, we're not regulating every homeowner or a couple of homeowners that might be composting together. And the universal recycling law allows anyone that's composting on site to discard their meat and bones in the trash, because we don't want to have the problems associated with composting meat and bones at the residential level, because they don't always necessarily get up to that temperature hot enough to deter vectors. So with that, I'll excuse myself and let you folks continue. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. And in terms of community composting and home composters that do want to compost their meat, we always recommend a tumbler, because that can, especially a Jora tumbler, specialized one, it can and will get up to high enough temperatures to do the PFRP. And if community composters are not using a tumbler or a Jora system, then we ask them not to compost meat for that very reason. Okay, so anybody know what the cost of a windrow turner is, or the range of costs for that, or prices for that?
Ours was $350,000.
And Kim, what was the screening that CompTech? What was the cost of that?
Oh, the turner or the screener?
Yeah.
Gosh. Dan, are you?
If that's all right. Dan Goosen, Green Mountain Compost. Hey, those new are currently around 750,000, I think, for that. What's called an L3. We got ours used for a third of that a number of years back, and similar to the haul truck that we got, that's also a used piece of equipment. So, just in terms of buying compost equipment, usually you save a ton of money on the front end by buying used if you can find something, but then you got to make sure you do a lot of careful buying, because you end up paying for it later in maintenance. And
This is Bob Spencer. We have a Comtech trommel screen for our finished product, and it was about $170,000. And Vermont DEC infrastructure paid 40% of that. Thank you, Kathy.
How do you turn your material, Eric?
There, I just unmuted myself. I really don't. I mean, I have a staging area where after I collect material that comes from the compost haulers, the food scrap haulers, I mix it in my receiving bay with my own dairy manure, wood chip, a little bit of select, as someone pointed out, select horse manure, and I put it in a staging area until I have enough staged ahead to produce to fill a bay to create a windrow. And that's usually about around 225 cubic yards. And then after I fill a windrow in stage one, again, using my ASP, I don't turn the windrow, I don't turn the material. I just let the air do the work, the aeration do the work, and I watch temperatures. And like all the others, my initial mistake this year was letting some compost get too hot, and it dried it somewhat. So I have backed off the aeration some. But at any rate, after temperatures start falling below 100 degrees or so, in phase one, I move it to phase two. And moving it to phase two essentially is a turn. I have a payloader that I move it from phase one to phase two with, and then I leave it in phase two where, again, it reheats in phase two because of the turn. And then, again, as necessity dictates, whether it's the temperature falling down below 100 degrees again, or I need the space for another amount of material, I move it from phase two to a curing area. So basically, my only turns are moving it from one area to another. And again, because of the ASP, the full ASP system that I use, I don't turn the compost at all.
Okay. And Bob, what's the size of your front loader?
We have a 5 cubic yard bucket. So it's able to turn the piles. I mean, we are so low tech, I have a loader and a screener, and we just put it in piles, and it takes a year.
Okay, Trevor?
We utilize a 950 loader, similar size, about 4 3/4 yard bucket. And then we have a 644 John Deere with the same 4.5-ish yard bucket. Similar to Eric, we do a lot of our turnings by working it through the process, but we probably, I would say that we turn our material between 7 and 8 times from start to finish.
Okay.
And like Trevor said, we have a John Deere 644K loader. It's very expensive, but you have to have a loader, a good sized bucket, to process 2,000, 5,000 yards a year. So,
yep. Okay, quick question for Kim. Where does someone pick up your compost these days if they're not a marketing person, a wholesaler?
So a little bit on that, we will sell to you if you can pick up 2 or more cubic yards of product at a time, but that does not include, like, you can't bring a pickup truck or a small trailer because of the weight of the product. So we do sell to local garden centers because they're able to take large quantities at a time from us. So they basically are doing the selling for us. We used to do retail all the time, and it just took so much time. We used to have to hire so many seasonal employees, and it just really complicates the system when you're trying to produce a quality compost and manage food waste. So we're like, let's focus on one thing and let the people who know how to sell it. So you can purchase it at local garden centers. We have a where to buy list on our website. And currently we are at a little bit of a bottleneck with how heavy the demand was at the beginning of the season and how quickly we're able to keep our screener running. So you may not be able to find it in a little bit, but right now I do know that they have some stock of our compost garden mix and topsoil.
Well, that's not a bad problem. Okay, Eric, I think you went over some of this, but so you move a material from phase 1 to phase 2 and phase 3, et cetera, with the bucket loader. How do you scoop material and drive the loader in the bay without damaging the piping?
Good question, Athena. Well, in phase 1, it's not a problem because in phase 1, zone 1 and 2 have the trenches, the aeration trenches, where the aeration pipes are subgrade, and so I can scrape right along the concrete with my loader. I have a smaller loader. I have a Caterpillar IT18, which has about it's a 2.5 or 3 yard bucket. And but I have to be more careful in phase 2 because in phase 2 the aeration pipes are on grade. I have found though that the HDPE pipe, the black pipe, is very, 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 very strong, and as long as I'm careful, I can actually skim the loader bucket right along the top of the pipe and not damage it. I'm told that you can actually run over that pipe and not damage it, although I haven't tested that theory. But my ASP system in phase 2 is set up so that it's easy for me to straddle the pipes and also work in between them when I'm cleaning out the material. So it's really non-problematic. The only thing I have to be really careful of is after the aeration pipes are buried, finding the end with the loader. I have to just take little bites until I find out where the stub end of the aeration pipe is. And after I can see the aeration pipe, then it's just a simple matter. Of course, the ASP pad is it has a slight grade to the north and northeast for leachate drainage, which, by the way, my leachate goes into a septic tank and then into a leach field. So we actually, even though we're a small facility, we do collect the leachate. But I'm able just to clean out the material with my loader by just being careful of where the pipes are and just, being a little bit careful not to damage the pipes in the process.
Great, thanks, Eric. So we are at the end of our panel, so I'll turn it over to Natasha. I just want to thank and appreciate all our panelists and also all of you for participating in our webinar this morning. Natasha.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists this morning. This was a great session, as well as to all of the participants for taking some time out of your morning to join us. I do want to just remind folks, and thank you, Kim, for putting it up there. At 1 o'clock, we have a session on compostables, disposables, and durables. At 3 p.m. is the food scrap diversion strategies for multi-unit complexes, and it seemed like there might be some interest for some of the participants here in that session. And as well, if you want to join the virtual tour, it's a concurrent session at 3 o'clock. That's actually Bob's site today, Wyndham Solid Waste Management District's compost facility. And Bob will be on hand for more Q&A. So we hope you can join that session. And then we'll be starting off tomorrow morning at 10 with an on-farm composting session, connecting farms to communities to close the nutrient loop. And you'll actually be, Eric's not on that panel, but we're using his farm as a case study. So you hear a little bit more about that site as well. And with that, I'll close the session, and I hope to see some of you in just a couple hours.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a good day, everyone.
Fun.